Welcome back, Devils fans. And the GOAT, Martin Brodeur, sat down recently with Pierre LeBrun from The Athletic to speak about the state of goaltending in today's game in the NHL. And I thought there was a lot of interesting tidbits and little quotes from Marty within this article that I wanted to share with you guys. So we'll just start off reading the article here. Never has the goaltending position felt more in flux than it does right now in the NHL. From sports science advising limited starts and performances fluctuating all over the place to front offices debating cap allocations to the position, we are a long way removed from an era when almost every team had a clear-cut number one who played almost every game. Last year's Stanley Cup winning goalie, Adin Hill, didn't start a playoff game until the second round, and I mean, if Martin Brodeur doesn't get injured against the Edmonton Oilers, who knows how he would have played out in net for Vegas Golden Knights. The Cup winner from 2 years ago, Darcy Kuemper, wasn't re-signed by the Colorado Avalanche in the aftermath of their championship win. Jordan Binnington began the 2018-19 season number 4 on the St. Louis Blues goalie depth chart before leading them to the Cup. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. For better or worse, this is uncharted territory. The evolution of the sport has put more physical duress than ever on goalies' movements to keep up with an offensive game that's played 100 miles per hour. And we are very far from the clear number one that plays every game. I mean, most teams have a guy that everyone considers the 1A, but I've said, for a long time on the channel, I'm not a fan of the tandem, goaltending situation, and I'm more old school in my thinking of, you find a workhorse who you lean on for the majority of the games. We'll continue on with the article. Goalies are arguably greater athletes than ever, but there's also a lack of trust and understanding in what we are seeing from one game to another. Shared workloads reign, and stud, dependable, true number ones are few and far between, all of which has been fascinating and sometimes perplexing to watch for the NHL's all-time winningest netminder, Martin Brodeur. The sport has changed, but the position has changed a lot just because of the workload that these guys are having, Brodeur told The Athletic during a chat at the morning skate for the New Jersey Devils and Toronto Maple Leafs on Tuesday. It's so volatile, that position. 1 year, you can be the top goalie. The second year, it's like you don't even belong in the league. It's weird how really volatile the position has become. Added the Hall of Famer, who's now the executive vice president of hockey ops for the Devils. Right now around the league, there's probably 5 guys that you could bank on, maybe up to 8 guys. Back then it was 30 guys, so it's different. Like I said, I think it's the workload. I think it's the skill of the players. For years it was the goalies are too good. You've got to find ways to score goals. Now it's like you have to find goalies to stop these guys. Indeed, it wasn't that long ago in the early to mid-2000s that the NHL openly talked about whether it should experiment with bigger nets because goal scoring was at such a low. Now, between the technology of the one-piece sticks, the speed of the game, and other factors, goalies are under constant duress and offense is not a problem. It has resulted in less consistent performances from year to year. Last year we had Vanacek, who going by the stats was maybe a bit above average, Brodeur said, but he helped give us the best year we ever had as a team in New Jersey. We had the most points ever in the standings in New Jersey last year, and I was on some pretty good teams. With a little above average goaltending, we were able to do that. This year has been a little rougher, obviously. And a little rougher, obviously, would be quite the understatement. We saw both Vitek Vanacek and Akira Schmid in the 22-23 season do pretty well for the majority of the regular season before Vitek fell apart in the playoffs. Akira had to come in relief, save us, win the Ranger series before they both played horribly against the Hurricanes. But, it is one of those things where this year I blame it mostly on the defense, obviously, for the goalies being super exposed, but they probably did play a little bit above their, normal capabilities maybe last year with a slightly better defense. But when Severson and Graves leave and you replace them with teenagers, that's going to be a big difference from last year to this year. And we saw that obviously as we went through the growing pains of the teenagers on the blue line. Akira, Dawes, and Vitek all got lit up their fair share throughout the season. We continue on with the article. But the example of Vanacek's performance from one season to the next is what we're seeing in so many places around the league. The unpredictability is driving front offices crazy on many NHL teams, not just in New Jersey. It's the system of 1A and 1B that's going to create that, Brodeur opined, because it's always going to be, we can't play back-to-back games. You're scared the number one gets hurt, and so you baby that guy for the longest time. So these guys are playing 55 games. They should be playing 65 to 70 games like we did. Well, Brodeur was more like 75 to 80 games per year in his heyday. We'll never see that again, but you understand his point. Limiting the wear and tear with pitch limits is important, but is there a finer line here? I think we baby our goalies, Brodeur said. I see it. I'm part of it. It's like my goalie coach will say, he's played 5 games the past 8 days. I'm like, so? And this is where it seems like Marty pretty much is in the exact mind frame that I am in terms of this 1A and 1B situation, and I can't really see how he could have any other opinion given the player that he was. But essentially, this 1A and 1B thing, I have never been a fan of it. I'll never continue to be a fan of it. And I think, if you want to succeed in this league, I think you need at least a guy, to play 60, 65. Marty says 65 to 70. I don't know that we'll ever see 70. But I do think if you have a workhorse who's capable, 65, maybe even the 70, but 60 to 65 should not be, out of reason. For most goalies, they won't play. Maybe there'll be 3 or 4 guys a year who will reach that 60 mark in some seasons, and it's, teams try their best to avoid it. But I think if you have a legitimate guy and he feels good and he's able to play, Marty started 78, 79 games in some seasons out of 82. The worst job in the entire NHL for pretty much all of Marty's career was to be the backup goalie for the New Jersey Devils. You're not going to play a lot. Marty rarely got pulled. And when he's starting 75, 76, 77 games a year, you're going to get very minimal starts. And it probably sucked for all those guys that played backup to him over the course of his illustrious career. But it is what it is. And I'm a big proponent of this methodology where you get a guy who could be the workhorse and you play him. I mean, it's pretty clear, cut and dry to me. People will say, oh, the analytics and all these things, and the article will touch on some of this in a minute. But, I'm not a big fan of the tandem thing. I think you need to have a capable backup. But the 1A, 1B thing is not really my cup of tea, and I would prefer to see us get a guy who wants the net, who commands the net, and can handle that amount of starts in a season and carry you to the playoffs and carry you throughout the playoffs. So we continue on with the article, but he also gets both sides of it. It's a good reality now. You need to have 2 goalies, he conceded. I think that's where it gets skewed. Like, it's hard to find that number 1 goalie. You get it in Nashville, you get it in Tampa, you get it in Calgary. There's a couple of places that have them, but there's not many. A lot of them are tandems. You look at Boston. They've been living off the tandem for the last 2 years, The Bruins, in fact, are largely credited for having starting the pitch limit on goalies several seasons ago. Former starter Tuukka Rask talked about it in a piece I wrote ahead of the 2019 Stanley Cup Final. The evolution we've seen with teams following that lead has challenged front offices to reconsider how they allocate cap dollars. Is $8 million the right number? Is $10 million the right number for your 2 goalies? What is it? Brodeur said. This year we played at $4 million for a while and that didn't work. And now this clearly shows to me that most teams are playing what I call, instead of money ball, I call it money puck. And the analytics and the number crunchers and the math nerds, they're all probably internally on most teams putting a cap on what they believe is the right number to spend on goaltending. And while you obviously always have to be cap conscious, I don't know that that's the appropriate way to go about really analyzing your situation. And again, for me, would prefer to have a guy that's going to play 60 to 70 games with a capable backup versus trying to find 2 guys that, one's going to play 50 or, and one's going to play 32 or one's going to play 47 and one's going to play 35. Like, I don't like the tandem, quite frankly. I really don't. Teams have been successful with it in the past few years, but there's also teams that don't really rely on that as much and have been successful as well. And so for me, I would prefer you get that stud guy that you lean on. He is the workhorse like Marty was. Obviously, no one's going to be the level of workhorse that Marty was and start 79 games. But I do think there's a lot of room for between a 1A type 45, 47 starts and the Marty 79. You could get a guy who's capable of playing that 65-ish or so games. And I think that's the way to go about it, even in today's league. But they talk about the cap money and how much you're going to spend on goalies. I don't have the answer to what that is, but I don't necessarily believe that you have to spend a certain amount or limit it at a certain amount to get the desired outcome for the season. Markstrom's making $6 million for the next couple of years. If we were to land him somehow during the summer, we could potentially have a backup that's on an entry-level contract making $1 million or less. I mean, those guys are around. Even Kakinen probably would sign for $1 million or less. So you're talking about, what's that? It'd be $6 million plus $1 million, $7 million. I mean, I think that's fair. Some top-tier goalies are going to be asking for 8 and 9 in the next couple of years, including UC Saros, which is the reason why I don't think we are going to acquire him, because when his contract is up, I definitely believe he's going to be looking in that $8 to $9 million mark, which, juggling some things around, I would happily pay. I think it's worth the money. A lot of people disagree with me there, and that's fine. I'd like to hear your opinion. Let me know in the comments what you think about Saros and paying him $8 to $9 million if necessary to retain his services. But there is no golden equation, but I feel like in these money puck times, they're trying to kind of, put a hard limit on what you're going to spend on goaltending. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to go about fixing the problem, especially when we've had atrocious goaltending and for so long. You could save money other places. You don't have to necessarily skimp out on goaltending, but it's an interesting debate for sure. I'd be curious to hear all of your comments on that. And we continue with the article. But it's one of those things where you wonder, how does it work? Every team is searching for the right solution with goalies right now. Brodeur feels that despite the lack of consistency, the skill level is not the issue. The average goalie is better than when I played, he said. They're unbelievable athletes, but you get to games, it's such a wide open game that if you're a young goalie, we see it now because we moved our young goalies down and put 2 older goalies in. We see how experience counts. They freeze the puck at the right time. They control the game, all the little things. Not saying they're going to win every game, but they play a certain way that really helps your team settle down. Still, Brodeur hasn't seen anything like the current state of things. It's kind of a mind twister, he said. What's the balance of how you play them, when you play them, who you get? So much is different than it used to be. The Devils are as data-driven as any organization in the league, and Brodeur believes in being as informed as possible, but the former superstar goalie in him clearly is still struggling somewhat with the sports science. Listen, ex-players will never buy into it 100% because we played the game, he said. The people who decide that never played the game, I'm not saying it's wrong because I think there's a lot of value in what they come up with, but I still believe it's still a sport. And you know what? It's a feel. If your athlete wants it and he tells you he wants to do it, you should let him do it. That's how it was worked in Tampa over the years. No one was going to tell Andrei Vasilevsky he couldn't be a workhorse. Number 88 wants the net all the time. Trust me, I've talked a bunch of times with Vasi about it, Brodeur said. And this is where, I get very concerned because the first sentence of this segment is the Devils are as data-driven as any organization in the league. Again, I think analytics have their place, but I do believe this organization and many others, but particularly in this conversation, the Devils, have gone and relied on analytics and data so much so that it ends up being a detriment when you don't allow the human element to be part of your decision processes and what I call the eye test to kind of navigate you or help navigate you in making personnel decisions for the roster. And so I do believe that the analytics team was a big part of the reason why Tom Fitzgerald this entire season held pat and did not obtain a goalie, because I believe that for whatever reason, whatever data the analytics and the math guys were showing, they were trying to paint the case that you could win with subpar NHL goaltending, and clearly, they were wrong. We were terrible all season long. We get no help until the deadline, and we get 2 goalies that either one of them earlier in the season would have helped us tremendously in our playoff hunt, but it was too little too late, and I think it is just frustrating, and I'm glad that Marty even kind of comments here on that he believes there is a value for the analytics, but he does want some sort of human element involved into the decisions. And I couldn't agree with that more. They didn't have this level of analytics and data and all these teams and these things back in the day. And, they kind of went by the eye test, talking to the goalies, seeing how they felt. And, you're never going to see a goalie play the amount of games Marty did in the current day NHL because of whatever analytics they have and data. But I believe there is probably not a ton of guys, but there is probably a few guys out there in the league right now that would be able to carry that sort of workload. Again, a credit to Marty that he really was a freak with amazing endurance, recovery, desire to win, desire to play. And, that's why he is the greatest of all time. One of the many reasons. But again, relying completely on analytics, it is very frightening. And I think that's a very big reason of some of the problem areas of the New Jersey Devils. I think the analytics kind of got us obsessed with speedy finesse players. And I think we've seen this season that, while those types of guys are great to have a balanced roster and compete in the league, you need some more of those sandpaper guys as well. And maybe the analytics teams don't look as, kindly on those types of players, and for good reason. But again, there's more to the game beyond what the data and the analytics show. And sometimes you need that human element. Guys that have played the game before, experienced in the league, to come in and make a decision that, we need this, type of player for whatever reason. And, the math team is not really feeling it. But I'm glad to hear Marty kind of, maybe not as strong as my opinion, but it is a very similar opinion that I had, is that, analytics have their place, but it can't be the end all be all. And so we continue with the article. But just like Vasilevsky today, some people felt Brodeur played too many games during his career, which Brodeur never understood. I would say, don't tell me Scott Stevens' job isn't harder than me. Brodeur said. I'm sitting there and I'm getting shot at. This guy, Stevens, is hitting everybody and he's playing 82 games. I can't play 82 games. I'm still a hockey player. Where Brodeur does recognize the need for evolution is the physical stress on netminders because of the post-to-post agility that's required in today's high-paced game. It puts a ton of physical pressure on a goalie. And I am so thankful and so glad that Marty made the analogy of, Scott Stevens plays 82 games and he's hitting people. I'm getting shot at. I can't play 82 games. Now, I'm not suggesting that a goaltender play 82 games, but it is funny when people nowadays, they've been conditioned to be shocked and horrified if a goalie plays back-to-back. And they're like, oh, my God, he played last night. And one of the things I always tell people is, in this case, let's just use Nico Dawes from earlier in the season. Oh, Nico Dawes played last night. How is he going to play again? I said, Nico Dawes played last night. So did Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Palat, et cetera, and these guys are taking a pounding. I understand that goaltending is physically demanding in a different way, but if these forwards could go out there and get crushed by the opposition and log however many minutes a night they're playing, I do believe that it's not this wild notion for a goaltender to play back-to-back games, and I'm glad that Marty made that comment because to me, again, very telling where his mind is at. And coincidentally, it aligns with my viewpoint that I've been talking about for quite a while on the channel. We continue with the article. Brodeur tells the story of being at a recent hockey practice for his son and a goalie parent asking about how best to prepare. I said, get their core strong. Make sure of their flexibility in their hips because watch your son right now. He's down on his knees. He goes up, he hits the post, and goes down to his knees. This is one day. He's going to do that 200 days a year, and he's going to do that for 20 years. So don't think he's not going to need surgery eventually. It's just the way they play. It takes a big toll on the goalie's body. That's why NHL teams talk all the time about how to reduce the workload in practice too, which then leads to the idea of 3 goalies on NHL teams, which is a whole other discussion for another day. And so that is the end of the article. Very telling to me conversation between Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic and Martin Brodeur, the greatest of all time, the netminder for all 3 of our New Jersey Devils Stanley Cup championship wins. Marty was robbed of the Conn Smythe in 2003. I will forever, fight that point. What an actual crime against the sport and Marty that was. And they gave it to Jaguar. That photo of Jaguar crying will forever be etched in my mind. But, I just thought it was worth kind of reviewing this article and giving a couple of my viewpoints on some of the things that Marty had said. Let me know in the comments what you think about what Marty said. What do you think about the tandem goalie situation? What do you think is the magic number, if there is one, to max spend on goalies? What do you think about Saros at $8 or $9 million? Because I think that's eventually what his services are going to cost. Anything else, Devils hockey, goalies, throw it out there. Love talking to you all. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. Until next time, friends, let's go Devils.